Welcome back to the Portage Health Foundation's Addiction Series. I'm your host, Sarah Blakely. In the first episode, we took a look at how addiction is a serious issue in our community. And today we'll hear from Nikki Collins, who will share her personal story of what it was like to be addicted. We'll then talk with Mark Maggio, the executive director of the Phoenix House, which provides residential services to men in Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula while also providing outpatient services to people throughout the Western U.P. And we'll finish up today talking with U.P. Health System physician Dr. Adam Frimodig.
Well, I always used to say addiction was like dancing with the devil, is what I would call it. You feel like you have no self-control, no self-hope, nothing. Addiction is when you no longer have any control over making choices and being part of life.
No one that I know that is an alcoholic or a drug addict set out to be an alcoholic or a drug addict. It's something that happened along the way, and once you're caught in it, it's a horrible place to be, and it's a very difficult illness to get out of, especially on your own. I mean, you really need some skilled help to do it.
We know now that brains with people that suffer from the disease of addiction actually function differently. Whether that was they had a genetic predisposition to it because they had family members or parents with alcoholism, which was more common 30 years ago, where now drug addiction and opioids and methamphetamine, where they're predisposed to it by both environment and genetics, which does play a role, or it was purely environmental and anybody can end up becoming addicted with using a substance long enough. It can happen either way, but we definitely know that the brain has a big part of this. So even when people want to stop, they may not be able to stop at that point. And part of the barriers that you talked about is some people need inpatient treatment. They're not going to be able to do this on their own. Whether it's something like alcohol abuse, where it's not safe for somebody to withdraw from alcohol on their own at their home because it can cause seizures and other significant medical problems that they could die from. But they just may not be able to withdraw or withstand the withdrawals, and they're going to use, where if they're in an inpatient setting with somebody monitoring them and keeping them away from these substances, once they get clean, they have a chance to maintain that sobriety. When we talk about the idea of addiction being a disease, and we talked about that the brain actually functions differently. So in general, there's two main areas of the brain that we worry about. There's a central area of the brain, hippocampal area, and substance nigrans. And this being in the middle of the brain is where we have our most vital necessities of life. So when we're hungry, when we're cold, anything that your body says you need to do this to survive. Well, in the setting of substance abuse, the patient will develop kind of a switch, we'll call it, just to make it easy, for whatever substance that is, whether it's opioids or alcohol, or it could be everything. Multiple people have multiple addictions. But when that switch is on because you've been using and it's not being fulfilled when you've actively just used it, it's saying, I need this to survive. Do whatever you can to survive. So the people that are stealing, ignoring their children, driving under the influence, it's not because they're bad people and they just want to do this to continue the habit. It's because their mind and their body is saying, you need this to survive. And when that switch is on, it's a losing battle. Almost nobody can fight that. And that's where we talk about getting into inpatient to get help. But the other area of the brain that's very important in this disease is the frontal temporal area of our brain, and that's where we have our rational and critical thinking. So that's the part that says, hey, do you remember when you spent a year in jail for that DUI and you got your license removed and you had $5,000 in fines and you're hungover every morning? That time was a really rough time. Let's not go back to that and don't start drinking. And when you're sober and that switch in the middle of your brain is off, the front part of the brain can win that. But the problem is, as soon as they have a few bad days in a row and they just say, I don't know what to do, I'm going to go back to taking a pain pill or drinking a beer because that made me feel better before, and that switch turns back on, they're right back down that cycle. And we have medications can help with that as part of the solution, but it's a bigger program to help with that. But that's kind of the cut down version of when we're talking about this. This is the disease, and people aren't choosing to do these things. They're being told by their brain that they have to.
Addiction is like dancing with the devil. That's a line we hope you remember the next time you think about someone with addiction. It's a dangerous disease and it can be fatal. We're thankful to Nikki for sharing her personal experience with us and for Mark and Dr. Frimodig for sharing their expertise. In this next episode, we'll dive into the stigma of addiction and why we as a community need to move past that. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, know that there are resources available in our community. Dial Help is a great place to start. They have a crisis line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, based right here in the Copper Country. Just dial 906-482-HELP, text 90635-NEEDS, or chat live with someone at dialhelp.org. If you're in any kind of medical emergency, dial 911 immediately. To learn more about the resources available in our community or to subscribe for email alerts for future episodes, just visit phfgive.org/addiction.